Good morning everybody, this is Stephen Pugh of the Home Bible College. Today is June the 9th and we're looking at the second part of Esther's book, Esther's wonderful book. It's Esther and chapter 5. Now let me start reading and we'll talk about it as we go. Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favour in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden sceptre that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the sceptre. Then said the king to her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given to thee to half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day into the banquet that I have prepared for him. So then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do what Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy position? What is thy petition? And it will be granted thee. What is thy request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then Esther answered and said, My petition and my request is that if I have found favour in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition, and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, for I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless Haman refrained himself, and when he came home he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king hath promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and the servants of the king. Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king into the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily unto the king, with the king into the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Chapter 6. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles, that they would be read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, keepers of the door, who sought to lay hold on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honour and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. The king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honour? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to honour more than me? And Haman said, Well, for the man whom the king delighteth to honour, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the royal crown which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man with all whom the king delighteth to honour, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, and thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honour. Now notice what Haman wants. He wants the king's clothes, he wants the king's horse, and he wants the king's crown. He's not ambitious, is he? He just wants to become king. That's all. He wants to take the royal throne off the head of Ahasuerus and have it put upon his own head. That is the audacity of the man. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as you have said, and so do it to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that you have spoken. Wow. Then took Haman the apparel, the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus it shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honour. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, and Haman hasted to his house mourning, having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, and this is my password for today, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but thou shalt surely fall before him. Now that is wise advice. She's saying, listen, if you've begun to fall in front of this man and he's a Jew, then you will definitely fall all the way. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hasted to bring Haman into the banquet that Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen, and the king said unto Esther on the second day of the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted unto thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to half of the kingdom. And Queen Esther answered and said, If I have found favour in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at thy petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, and to be slain, and to perish, that is, to die. But if we have been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, and I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. This is what she's saying. She's saying, listen, we have all been sold. We've been sold to death. And if I'd have held my tongue, then the enemy would have prevailed in spite of the word of the king. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto the king, to Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine, in his wrath went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? In other words, he's saying, will he go in and rape my queen? And as the word went out of the king's house, as the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. You see, Haman would never see anything ever again. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who hath spoken good for the king. It standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And then was the king's wrath pacified. When this book is read, it's read in the Feast of Purim. The Feast of Purim is a Jewish celebration of this mighty deliverance of the Jews during their exile with the Persians. This is where King Ahasuerus is. And when the story is read, the crowd that are listening react. So when they mention Mordecai or Esther or Ahasuerus, they cheer. And when the name of Haman is mentioned, they all boo. And so we can hear at the end of verse 10, then was the king's wrath pacified, and you can hear all the Jews shouting for joy, shouting for joy. What a great book this is. This would have been one of the most terrible holocausts against the Jews, but it was all prevented by the godliness of Mordecai and by the courage of Esther. Well, God bless you. Look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.